6 o'clock. I want to respect everyone's time and call the meeting to order. I was not at the February 26th meeting, so I'm going to have to recuse myself, but has everyone had a chance to review the meeting minutes? And if so, can we have a recommendation to approve?
I haven't seen any meeting minutes.
I had it on there, but I don't think there were any draft minutes sent around.
Okay, fair enough then. How about a discussion of the procurement delivery method? Who's best to start that off? Is it Joe or Dennis?
So I can kick it off. And for the last meeting on the 26th, I started with all of you, then left for a meeting, then came back because clearly I am a glutton for punishment and wanted more town meetings that night. And in talking to Dennis, he let me know there was also a discussion about procurement method and delivery method, and whether or not CM at risk was an option, so that we could just make sure we were all on the same page. I did ask town council to put an opinion in email, and that then was forwarded to everyone. And the short of it is that for CM at risk to be an option, not only do we have to draft policies, but we also have to then go to town meeting, and we have to have the IG's office approve that as a delivery method. One of the concerns, especially because of town meeting, that ends up being something that is kicking any decisions down the road another 5-6 months. And realistically, I think the committee would have to go before the select board and argue on why that would be the best option for this project, which in and of itself, the board may have a lot of questions as far as whether that is the best, and especially knowing we have a bunch of projects that are going to be quickly coming on our heels. So want to provide you all with that opinion, or at least that write-up from town council, so that we can make sure that we're on the same page, and then as a committee just go forward on this project, because it would result in at least changing the timeline for this project. Dennis, you want to add anything else?
No, that's the crutch of it.
So not only does it add time, but it also adds 2 levels of risk, right? The select board could elect not to put it on the town meeting warrant, and town meeting could elect not to vote for it.
Technically 3, because the IG also, as was relayed to us from town council, the IG's office prefers following the traditional delivery method, procurement method. So we have to identify why this project would be best handled by CM at risk, and that's not a foregone conclusion that they would approve it either.
Thank you. Dan, I know that you were the one who brought this up initially. Do you wish to comment?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we have the conversation about delivery methods and what's out there. I understand the points that yourself and Joe had raised about as it relates to our internal risk, which is, to your point, slowing things down, getting those approvals. You don't have to do that. We don't have to go that method. The traditional hard bid has its own set of risks, and I think the risks that I had brought up, the delivery method, is something to be looked at or considered, was because of the downside risks that we'll end up inheriting on a project that can be complicated, especially because right now that it's with all that's going on with new codes, energy code, our idea of having a phased construction project. That's the only reason I was saying, hey, let's have this conversation about using the CM at risk method, because you have a different risk management in terms of the actual delivery of the project I think the risk that you and Joe are bringing up, John, are the risk internally of getting it approved within our own internal politics or process within our town government. So they're two different risk buckets. With the CM at risk, I'll just back up quickly. My biggest concerns right now is I don't think we have an $8 million project that is kind of been floated. I just don't think we do. I'm not even close. In fact, I see project budgets. I'm involved in scoping and developing building project budgets every day. Not as much public work in Massachusetts, some public work in Mass, but I have a good sense of what's going on with dollars right now. And I think in order to build phase one with maybe a few things from, a must haves or must needs from phase 2 or 3 is I think we're going to be in a situation where developing a project budget that's going to be within a target that we can get an agreement to from the Board of Selectmen and the voters to hit for, and try to get as much done in a creative way. That CM and RESC is one of the only ways to do that. So I think all of our interviewees from the OPMs, 2 of the 3 did a really good job talking about it. One kind of bowed out of it, the conversation, saying, hey, your $8 million project's not big enough. And he's like, yep, you're right, it isn't. But I think, the point is I don't think we're looking at an $8 million project just to build phase 1 and some other stuff. And I know that CM at risk is a delivery method that I will tell you as a design professional doing federal, state, and private sector commercial work every day, all day. In the government, I do almost exclusive in the federal government and most state governments. All I'm doing project work these days is at CM at risk or design build, just because that's how everybody's managing risk and uncertainty in this market. I think that our project, depending on how big we think it really should be or should be the decider for the delivery method. So I think it's more important to get an OPM hired and get started on the design process. And I think within the first phase of the design process, we'll know if we need to go to that delivery method. And I guess the question is we don't have all the dollars for the full design process anyways in our warrant article. So my thought is this delivery method for at the moment, I don't think we need to make that decision, but I think we, instead of just going into a traditional design file submit public process in Mass, which, has its own set of downs, which is basically the general contractor has not as much control over subcontractors. When you're building a building brand new out of the ground, there's no reason to go there because you don't have uncertainty. Existing buildings where we need to basically build an addition on a building and then turn around and go into an older building and tear it apart and rehabilitate it and make it modern and new and then deal with phasing, that's where the risk comes in. So that was my only reason to bringing it onto the table, because I think that's, just understanding what's going on in the industry. Massachusetts state procurement laws, we're probably one of the few states that doesn't have all the methods from the Design Build Institute, which CM risk comes from, as delivery methods. It's unfortunately part of the parochial traditional way of governing in Mass and our procurement process. So I know that DCAM, we're doing more and more work with DCAM at the state level, and they're trending in the direction of this alternative as becoming more common. So it really comes down to this issue of I don't think we need to make this decision tonight, and I don't have a problem as a committee deferring it. I guess my bigger question is we don't have all the design fees for a full design of phase 1, in my humble opinion. And we don't have, because we don't have really good ROM costs that came off of a pre-pandemic number from Wesson and Sampson in the study efforts that they helped us with. So I think we really need to get somebody on board and do a first phase of understanding what project we want to try to accomplish in a budget. Because one thing I don't want to go in front of the voters is just a earshot guess of how much of do we need to do, what we need to do to give Dennis and his department the right facilities, the safe and operationally efficient facilities that are down that the DPW desperately needs.
Thank you, Dan. Does anyone else have any comments or questions on the procurement delivery method?
Through the
If
chair,
not- Yeah, please.
I not necessarily on the. I agree with Dan on just about everything he's saying. But one of the things that caught my attention, because Dan has been on the committee since the beginning, so Dan has the experience going all the way back when it was a conceptual design, working with the committee to try to come up with what the DPW needs to have out there. And the point I'm trying to get at, Mr. Chairman, is the direction that the committee took, that committee at that time, came from a different board of selectmen than today. Members have changed since then. So one of the things that I would put out there for the committee's consideration probably would behoove the committee to revisit the board at some time in the not so distant future to ensure that they're still on track with a phased out, because Dan remembers we went through the pros and cons of phasing versus building the whole thing at once. And it's obvious. The pros were, if you build the whole thing at once, you're going to save a lot of money. The cons were, you got to come up with all that money right at the get-go. So the board at that time had suggested a possible 2 or maybe even a 3-phase approach. And that's what the committee took as an advisement. But like I said, it's been a long time since the board has had this discussion, and you have different members, 2 of them in particular, on that board. There's only one. Brett was the only one that was there at the beginning. Maureen and Laura both were not on that original. So the board today might have a different approach. They might maintain that they want to see the committee try to phase it so that it's more palatable to the taxpayers, and it's something that's realistic over the course of 5 years. If we bond out a certain way, dealing with the economy and the unknown, or they might say, let's see what the numbers turn out. And if it's that much of a cost savings, the recommendation is to bite the bullet, then that's the route we go. So I'm just throwing that out for the committee. A lot of time has passed. The board might feel different today. I don't know.
Through the chair, Dan, would we have enough, which I think is a great idea, Dennis, but do we have can we estimate the numbers to make a presentation to the selectmen now?
Well, my thinking was, and going back to the regional committee, was we didn't ask for the entire design fees for the full build out because 2 reasons. We didn't have an independent cost estimate to understand what that really was. We had a ROM cost, a rough order of magnitude, and that was even ahead of what the pandemic has produced and inflation and all the other things that have gone on. I mean, depending on the building types, I know marketplace, we see anything from about 30 to 50% more expensive than before the pandemic. And the energy code is the new left-hand turn that has really turned everybody on their head. And this building is a building that actually has got a challenge because you're going to be forced to consider building systems that most everybody used to dismiss because you could just play this life cycle analysis cost game and say, it's just too expensive, can't do it. Well, now the energy code has climate goals built into the building code and the energy code and climate initiatives that don't let you punt anymore. Punting is an option anymore. You have to meet an energy use intensity target to meet the IECC, International Energy Conservation Code, as amended by Massachusetts, for a performance on a building. And you have to look at your sources, aka where you get your energy from, which includes fossil fuel use and the electric grid, including how clean the electric grid is. And let me give you a little a bummer there is that we don't have a clean electric grid in Massachusetts. We have a pretty dirty one by most standards. So what's happening is you're being forced to do things like geothermal, radiant heat. You're forced to try to consider some solar. You're kind of pushed into doing things. I know that in our case in New England, we're doing so much more geothermal than we were not too long ago. So that's my point with not having the full design fees. I would rather just punt this delivery method down, because I think we need to do the 65% design and then stop and then decide if we want to transition a delivery method once we have that. Because once we have a developed design that's somewhere between 50 to 75% complete, then you can budget this thing and answer some of those questions. Otherwise, like I said, I don't have a stomach for going in front of voters and telling them, oh yeah, the building, it may be $16 million. Oh, it could be 20. You know, I think that's not going to go well at all. And we're watching projects get clobbered by wandering into not sorting that stuff out up front. So I think, Dennis, you're going to be, no matter what's happening in real life in real time right now in the building industry is you're getting to build, you need to make sure you build a quality building that meets your bare minimum, not your bare minimum, the necessary requirements, maybe have a factor for some growth. And we're seeing that number be challenged, down to a simple percentage, like between 10 and 20%. That's it. Like, that's how much I'm going to grow into it. Or I defer a future project phase. That's how I'm going to handle growth, is I know that I have already pre-planned out how to tack another addition onto my building. Kind of like what we were left with from the people who built our current DPW in 93. They always knew that there was a need to potentially add to it. So the building is already set up to be added onto. So, and that's kind of was the basis behind the phasing part. I think at the end of the day, this project, I'm just swagging a number. It's probably, if we wanted to build the full 3 phases, the salt shed and the fuel station, Dennis, I mean, you're probably talking a $20 million project. I mean, the OPMs floated some numbers at us when we threw that out there. So, they gave some examples. We're in the tens of millions of dollars, not the single digits of millions of dollars on a project right now. So that's my kind of my thoughts, which is why I think we can punt. And I think it's more important for us to go hire an OPM off of the interview from last time. To your point, we're authorized to do that. That doesn't slow us down. And we can punt the delivery method after we do an initial planning phase with our OPM and an architect, engineer, an AE.
Joe, to Dennis's point about going back to the select board, the select board, it's going to change again before this comes up for town meeting vote. The other challenges, the other capital needs. Do you think it's worth going back, or should we hire the OPM and start the work of putting together an estimate and then maybe go back?
I think the board as a whole, one, isn't going to change in this coming election. Maureen's the only one that took out and returned papers, so she's running unopposed. So the select board's going to be stable for the next 15 months from this period until the next election. The board is supportive of DPW and identifies that is one of the priorities. And I don't think we have enough information to go back and say, hey, should we be phasing this, or should we be doing it all together? Without, and I can always do informal with the board, I would be expecting them to say, you've already lost some runway here in the calendar, and to get going. Because we also, one other thing, sorry, John, is, we only have partial funding. We don't have enough funding to go to construction. So we're going back no matter what, and we're going to be driven more by logistics, and cost is going to be a factor that, we're going to need finance committee and select board support. So the more information we can have for that, I think we'd be in better position for that.
And
Joe,
John,
I liked what you said, Joe, about the select board would tell us to get on with it. I would like to get on with it and choose our OPM. But Dan, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, no, like you said, I'm at 100%. We're all saying the same thing, because then what can happen, Joe, is we can get to the 65 or 75%, how much we can squeeze out of it. And at that point, when you go back for the ask, instead of going, if you went traditional design bid build 149, we'd be asking for more design money and not construction money. If we get to the point at 65% design and we're comfortable that we have a project, the go back ask is we want the money to essentially do design and construction complete finish using CM at risk. So that's the single ask. That's where you get the opportunity to pick your delivery method after we finish, Joe. And then like, it'll make sense at that point. If we feel like we need to do that to be creative or to be thoughtful or to be flexible. And more importantly, only you have to go back to ask for voter monies one more time.
Mhm.
So that's kind of like the option. So we would have the option if we went to the traditional method, we're going back for another ask for design money, then we'll have to go back for a construction number money.
Right.
Whereas we potentially can finish the 65% and go back one more time for the design and construction and use the alternative method. And that's the justification. We'll be over $10 million. So we'll be in that threshold and we'll be able to have been pretty creative and thoughtful. And I feel like all three OPMs, two of the three for sure, were comfortable with that method. The third one, the smaller firm, maybe not as much, and he's very familiar with it. They weren't shying away from it. They just didn't have a lot to talk about experience-wise. But Answer and Vertex clearly can do this. It's not that either one of those firms could do this approach with us. So,
Dan, I love your passion. I love your passion for CM at risk.
Well, it is what it is.
Yeah.
It's
Sorry, does anyone else have any questions before we move on to OPM consultant and selecting a consultant?
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
just to add on to basically what Dan and Joe are saying, from the finance committee aspect, there's a lot of stuff coming up. All right, we got people out there think they're going to renovate Holy Angels. We got the two issues with MURSD, the field and the capital needs for that, and we got BVT as well. Joe, is that what Joe, you put three fingers up? Am I?
I just meant that only because Mendon Upton separated out their capital into three separate articles.
All right.
We know one is the roof, just like BVT is the roof project. And then we have the fields, and then we have the secondary capital improvement project for Mendon Upton.
And so again, we have those. The schools basically said, we're coming for an override next year. Historically, under the prior superintendent, we were talking about having an override every 5 years. And that happened back a few years ago. Well, it's been 10 years since they had an override. I think the school district this year took $1.5 million from their E&D to apply it to the operational budget. So in effect, they're starting next year with a structural deficit of $1.5 million. So there are these other aspects of the town government and where the money's coming from. And I keep saying, I go to these meetings and say, you don't have to convince me. You got to convince the guy that's paying the bill. And, if Dan's approach, going back only one time, sure makes a lot of sense to me in that regard. So, given what, everybody said here so far, I'm inclined to go with your OPM and do what has to be done, and at the time, decide what the method you're going to use. That's my 2 cents.
I think that there are some great points being made here. I think that we need to bring in an OPM to help us hone down from all these different decision points, help us to really focus on what the correct path forward is for the DPW and for the community. So can I was not at the February 26th meeting. I apologize for that. Who was there and can give us a summary of the discussion and perhaps a recommendation on the OPMs that were interviewed?
I can probably give a rundown.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think John joined also. I think he might be the 591 number that just jumped in. And hopefully maybe he can help a little bit too. And Paul, I think you had some really good points and the kind of follow-ups, but we interviewed Answer, CMS, and Vertex in that order. Answer and Vertex are both larger firms. We know Vertex, I guess they're more of kind of like a mid-level to larger firm organization. We know them very well. We've been working with them. We've been a client to them for what, 12 or 14 years now?
Long time.
Long time. Yeah. So, I mean, all three OPMs gave good presentations. They all were pretty interactive in the Q&A session, in the dialogue. I feel like all three are qualified for sure, but they had different strengths and weaknesses. So Vertex is that known. They did bring in thinking that we were using, by default, Weston and Sampson, but they quickly corrected themselves, saying that was their misunderstanding. They fairly stayed neutral on the whole delivery method, but were very engaging of the pros and cons to it, which was good. And I think, Paul, my biggest question that you would have the answer to, and I'll defer to you in the summary of Vertex is, are we going to get the exact people we saw in front of us in terms of, who do we going to spend the most time with in guiding us?
I think it's going to be Steve Kirby.
So you think they're going to stick with Steve? I don't know if that younger gentleman was going to be somebody that was going to have a larger role.
Dan was there every day on the community center till we got 99% complete. And there's, I don't know how many pictures and video of everything. And Danny Alema was his name, and he was very competent. We had construction meetings every Thursday, and Dan was there, and he contributed whatever it is, and he reports to Steve Kirby on that project. And Steve was very demanding to the extent that making sure that Dan had all his I's dotted and all his T's crossed.
Yeah, I think Dan was the construction administration, so that's a guy you won't see until you're building. But it sounds like Steve Kirby is the person, or the younger gentleman with the glasses. I forget his name. I'm not good at names. I didn't know.
Yeah, I did not know him, but Kirby was involved in the town hall, and I don't know how many times a week I'd talk to Kirby involved in the community center, and I found them to be extremely conscientious, and they were pointing out lots of things. Hey, you missed this. You can change. They changed this, and he was. They were pretty tight on the GC. They worked very closely together, but he knows it. He knows his stuff. Okay, and like you say, it's not his first rodeo. The town has had very successful experience with them. For what it's worth, we ended up with a $369,000 leftover from the original appropriation. And when we started this project, I think we only had like a 6 or 7% contingency going in. And as we worked through the project, the value engineering decisions that we made, the contingency increased as we went along. So again, and we did this during COVID as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah, in a non-COVID world, people are doing more 2 to 3% contingencies right now. That's the world we're living in.
yeah.
So which is why, John, I'm excited about CM at risk, because you can manage your money and your risk a little differently at your hands. But so that was, and they are also very good about the delivery method discussion. So I felt like they were a solid proposal. CMS was the small firm. if we were doing a less than $10 million project that was really lean and straightforward. I feel like that was something that came out. They had a good presentation. They didn't put the slides up, which was kind of interesting. I think they just didn't ask, like, how do I get our slides up? Whereas Vertex asked how to do that. The first firm did that, Answer did that automatically. Yeah, they seem to be kind of more of a little less. They were not afraid of the different delivery method discussion. Just didn't expand on it as much, and thought if we didn't have a $10 million higher project, that why are we even talking about it? So it wasn't a little less engaging, but again, they seem like a solid organization and firm. And if you're building a smaller DPW project, and based on their project examples, I think they're definitely a good competitor. And then Answer was one that, much like Vertex, the larger firm, they had a younger gentleman who was actually a local BVT grad, was going to be one of the people that would be part of our team. They sounds like they do quite a bit of more state work, so they probably were the firm that had a little more enthusiasm towards like the delivery method of design, bid, build, or the CM at risk approach as opposed to the design, bid, build, but they were comfortable with either. They have a lot of state work. It seems like they, like Vertex, they're pretty seasoned in that. And they had a little more experience with the energy piece of it. But I don't think that in and alone for this kind of building type isn't as necessary of a piece of information, because that's really going to come with the architects and engineers. They just help guide the conversation to make sure that choices and selections align with reality, mostly dollars and risk is what our OPM is going to help us with. So Answer had that a little more strength, and probably it sounded like a little more strength in the delivery method approach, a little more energy piece. Did not have as much experience working with a town our size. So, and then like I said, other than that, the team had some local folks that were specifically pitched as the people to work with us. So that's my bunch of bullet notes, and I had taken a page of bullets in all three firms. So
Great
I don't know.
summary. Thank you, Dan. Does anyone else have any opinions or anything to add to what Dan had shared? Any more insights? If not, is there a clear winner here? Is there someone who will best represent the DPW in the town?
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
may I move that we appoint or choose Vertex as the OPM consultant for this project?
Absolutely. Do we have a second?
I'd second that.
Any discussion on the motion in the second? If not, should we do a roll call vote, Joe, because this is remote?
You have to.
Okay. And I don't know, who's the telephone number ending in 02?
Is that John? Is that John Mullen? Dan?
John, are you available, John? I'm going to go to Dave for your vote. Dave? And I'm not
You're
hearing
muted,
you,
Dave.
Dave.
I'm in favor of that.
John Johnson?
I'm in favor of Vertex.
Andy Leonard?
Vertex,
Dan Lazars?
Vertex.
Paul Flaherty?
Aye.
And I'm an aye
Vertex.
as well. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. The next item we have, it has been my absolute privilege and honor to serve amongst you gentlemen, looking at how we can bring a new DPW facility to the town of Upton. And I know that Paul had seen on the news the other day, flicking channels, it was a slow news day for Spectrum, but I have accepted the position of Commissioner of Public Works for the city of Worcester, and that is an extremely time-demanding job for me. And I would love to stay on this committee to help out. I think I still bring value. However, I don't want to hold the committee back based on the fact that I may be tied up and not able to continue the progress of this group. So what I would like to do is, if you will have me, I would love to stay on the committee, but I'm going to have to step down from being the chair. And I think that's in the best interest of the town and this committee. So I would open it up if anyone wishes to step into that role as chair. This is kind of like everyone steps backwards and see who's standing at the front.
Dan, you can't do it.
No, I got way too much on my plate. No way. I'll be the vice chair to back somebody up for sure, but I can't be the chair.
I'd
You
like
know, John, that I've been christened to do this based on my past experience with this, and I will do it. I will run the meetings. I don't intend to get involved in the professional aspects and questions of it. I will depend on you professionals, construction professionals, to do it. But as far as, running the meeting and trying to keep things moving in the right direction, I will do my best.
Paul, thank you very much for stepping forward. Joe, is that
I didn't
something
have
we
a,
should
Dennis
vote
told
on?
me I didn't have a choice.
I'm going to make a nomination. I nominate Paul Flaherty to be the chairman.
I'll
I
second
second
that.
that.
All right, so let's do a roll call vote. Andy Leonard,
Mr. Flaherty.
Dave O'Brien,
Mr. Flaherty.
John Johnson,
I'm with you, Paul.
Dan Lazars,
Love it.
and I am also a yes. And so that's unanimous. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to abstain. Very good.
Wait, you can't abstain.
I thought maybe you would vote no. Mr. Chairman, I will turn it over to you to discuss the committee's next steps.
Oh, well, thank you, sir.
Wow, yeah, you're stepping right into the seat.
No. Dennis and I had a conversation earlier this week, so this is no surprise.
Okay.
We will, I will notify Kirby tonight, and Joe, can you send out the formal notice? And then
Yep.
It's up to the town. The next step is for the town manager to engage a contract with Vertex. I know it took a while for Derek to negotiate the contract with them on the community center, but I believe we'll be successful. We have sufficient funds right now to execute the contract. Do we not, Joe?
Yeah,
So-
and we'll take care of that side of it. I'll want to just touch base with you as far as technically the building committee also has authorization to engage engineers. So we'll touch base as far as the administrative, as far as whether or not we need to get the committee to authorize signing the contract. That's just one of the things I just want to look up.
All right. Dan, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if we have the committee look at that contract and discuss it and stuff, because we're doing a different delivery method, and make sure that we're getting the best dollars out of our ask of Vertex for this first piece. That way we're being thoughtful and wise. And I would just ask Dennis and John to start doing their homework about putting an order of priority of things you want to do in terms of like pieces and parts of what's important, because you're going to want to figure out how you spend your design money, with Vertex helping us prepare a selection process for a design professional. So I think that would be helpful. And I think the only thing I'd ask you to do for the other two interviewees that took the time to do presentations and come and talk to us and stuff, that in addition to just sending out a notice, Joe, it's always nice to give them a phone call and give them a
Mhm.
simple debrief and let them know that we appreciated their work and their effort, and that,
Yep.
I think that's important. So,
That
Yep.
was, that was my next note that I had here to, thank the other unsuccessful, inquiries on this project. Now, Dan led it earlier this and he volunteered, so, at this time, I move to, move for Dan Lazarus to be the vice chairman of this committee.
I'll
Is there
second
a
that.
sec? Motion's made and seconded. Is there any more discussion? No, all right, roll call vote. Dan Lazarus, no. John Wesley,
Aye.
Andy Leonard,
Aye.
Dave O'Brien,
Aye.
John Johnson,
Aye.
Paul Flaherty, aye. Show that unanimous action. Oh, I'm sorry, John Mullen, I didn't get you in there, did I?
No, you didn't. Sorry, I was late. Aye.
All right. So show that unanimous action. Uh,
I didn't get to
suppose
abstain. I didn't get to abstain.
Or vote no.
but Dan, you volunteered, so, that's what happens. You and I
I
volunteered.
know.
So, I suppose the next thing we gotta do is wait till we get a contract with Vertex. Dennis, can you, got any suggestions here? John Westling, Andy, anybody here?
No, I'll assist the town manager. And there's only two payment options available under the procurement law. So it's either a set amount or a fee not to exceed. And then obviously KP Law will help us with the contract. I wouldn't notify the other applicants, the other two firms, until you've successfully negotiated a contract with Vertex, because if that was to go south under the law, you have the ability to negotiate with the other companies. So I would wait
Alright.
until you had a successful contract and then notify the other companies. I don't think it will take long, Joe. It could be pretty quick.
That makes sense. So does anybody else have any comments? Anything you want to add to this meeting? Our next meeting will be dependent on when we get Vertex on board. Nobody else has any comments? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Seconded.
all in favor? Oh, no, sorry, roll call vote. Paul Flaherty, aye. John Westling,
Aye.
Andy Leonard,
Aye.
Dave O'Brien,
Aye.
John Mullen,
Aye.
John Johnson,
Aye.
Dan Lazars.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.